Schooling. Is it an option you've ever considered for your family? Maybe you live in an area where the kids have to travel long distances to get to school, or you have a child who doesn't fit into the conventional schooling system. Figures released last month from the New South Wales Department of Education show that homeschooling registrations more than doubled between 2019 and 2024, from 5,907 to 12,762. So what's behind the increase, and how much support do families need to educate their children well? Dr. David Roy is a lecturer in education at the University of Newcastle and joins us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. It's great to be speaking to you today.
Oh, thank you for your time today. What do you think is behind the increase? I mean, has COVID had a bit to do with this?
I think COVID did have a factor, and numbers did increase significantly after COVID, because families realised that actually their kids can learn at home, and for many kids, they were actually thriving a little bit better at home rather than some of the formal structures that schools impose. So for many families, they realised we can actually do this ourselves, and our kids seem to be a bit happier. It's also maybe possibly stating that what's happening in schools is not quite meeting the needs of kids in the 21st century, and that's why homeschooling is increasing.
What's happening in our schools to make parents think that the better option is to school their children at home?
School is about math education, and so they kind of teach towards the middle of the kids, not the high achievers or the ones who are struggling, and so kids can fall through the cracks. So for some kids, it's an overwhelming experience, or their learning needs are not being met either because they're more than able to cope with the curriculum or because they're really struggling with it. And we do find that one of the larger groups of kids that are maybe not succeeding in schools are children with disability, particularly our neurodiverse kids. And they are finding that often they are succeeding more at home than they can do in the school.
Well, what does the data say about rates of homeschooling in our region?
Well, in the New England region, and what's really nice is that that is provided every year. So they actually do now provide this, and they have done for the past 10 years. In New England, there's about 4% of the homeschoolers are in New England, which is slightly above most other areas, but it's not one of the highest. The highest areas are really the Hunter, where I'm kind of based. Sydney West has just gone gangbusters. It's up at 32% now. That's a massive increase. And we've also got in the South Coast. So kind of more kind of regional areas are increasing, and the kind of extreme suburbs more than rural areas. But again, the population is different within rural areas to regional into the kind of inner city areas as well. So that's to kind of be expected. It's in line with the statistics across New South Wales and in fact across Australia.
So do you think that's down to, huge schools in the cities, overpopulation of kids, and kids maybe not getting the attention that they need?
I think also within rural areas, there's a much stronger sense of community. So in some ways, the schooling can be more personal in a rural area as well. And also for homeschoolers, there's more facilities to maybe access within the kind of the regional areas more than the rural, and that's why they feel that they have the opportunity to do that. One of the things when you homeschool is it does have an impact on family income, and therefore if you can afford to have one family member lose an income, you can afford to homeschool, because there's absolutely no funding given to families or children when they're homeschooled.
So, Dr. David Roy, which types of students do you think homeschooling suits? I mean, what do we know about the types of kids that are being homeschooled?
Well, there's a whole variety of types of kids. As I said earlier, one of the larger groupings is those children with a disability. They make up about just under 25% of the kids. And 20 or so percent of the people who choose to homeschool do so for philosophical reasons, as in they just don't agree with the way that the education system works and they want to do it their way. What surprises people is the number who homeschool for religious reasons is actually really quite low at 5%, and the reason for bullying is minute. It's at less than about 0.5%. So bullying is not the factor that causes people to homeschool. There is a large swathe of kids. We don't know why they are homeschooled because there's no requirement for families to say, this is why I'm homeschooling. We're quite lucky in that sense as we don't have to give a reason to homeschool. We're not like some other countries in Europe who actively don't encourage homeschooling. They don't want you to be homeschooled. So there's about 30% of kids, we just don't know why they're being homeschooled, but we suspect it's because of areas of educational need just not being met for that particular kid.
So what does the research show about student progress and social development of homeschoolers?
A nice big study done in New South Wales by NESA about 15 years ago, and it showed that there was no significant difference in outcome, whether they were at school or at homeschooling. Kids still go to universities, kids still go and get trade jobs. There is no kind of downside towards it, and that reflects the data that we get from the United States as well. It's one of the reasons that myself and some colleagues from Queensland and from New South Wales and from down in Victoria are doing a larger study to work out what are the outcomes for kids who homeschool. But from what we're finding so far, they're no different to schools. So kids do not suffer. They don't lack in social interaction with others because there's lots of opportunities in homeschooling to interact with others, and they actually succeed academically.
What about the approaches to homeschooling? I mean, what are they? What do they look like?
They can go from extreme. They can go from basically having a school in your house where you basically set up a timetable. And some families do this. They like this structure. And kids are sitting at a desk and they spend an hour on one subject, just basically doing school, but in the house. The other extreme form is called unschooling, where it's completely unstructured and you just focus on, like, you get up and you're maybe doing some gardening and you're learning through gardening, and then you do some cooking, or you might go out to a museum or to an art show or do some sport. And it's really led by learning through day-to-day activities. So long as kids are meeting the basic curriculum needs that is required, then you can actually do anything you want, so long as kids are growing, developing, and getting ready to be adults in society. You've got to remember, everything that we do has got a learning element to it. When I'm cooking, I'm kind of doing chemistry as well as food technology, and I can have my kids beside me and teach them how to do that, and they're learning all the time.
Wow, okay. Dr. David Roy is with us this morning, lecturer in education at the University of Newcastle. I'd love to hear from you this morning if you've got some experience with homeschooling, whether you were taught your schooling at home or for part of your schooling years. Maybe you've been involved with teaching your children their education at home. 0467922684. 684. That is the number to text, or you can give us a call as well on 1300 648 222. Dr. David Roy, you've got some experience homeschooling your kids.
We homeschooled one of our kids for about 7 years. Just school was not working for him for various reasons. And then when it became ready for secondary school, he wanted to go to school. That was his choice. He decided that he'd been homeschooling enough and he wanted to go there. And so we followed his lead, and he loved homeschooling. He also loves going to the school he goes to just now, which is in a regional area. So it just depends on what you want to do as a family. We did find that the homeschooling did take up our time, but for me as an educator, and my wife led a lot of the homeschooling in the house, I actually improved as a teacher just by homeschooling my own son. I learned new things that I could then take back to the classroom. And that's the other interesting statistic. 20% of homeschoolers are teachers. So they're already qualified in teaching, and they're choosing not to be in the schools. We also know that a lot of other families have got extended family members who are teachers and then can support it. So for us, it really made us close as a family. It was tiring. It did take an economic toll because my wife was not working when she was kind of taking charge of the homeschooling element. But for us, it was 6-7 years.
Well, what role does the Australian curriculum have in homeschooling? I mean, how closely tied to the curriculum is homeschooling?
Well, you've got to show that you are meeting curriculum targets. And every year or 2 years, you have what is called an authorised person. They have to legally come and check what's happening in your in your house and just have to visually sight the child to make sure that there is no harm, if that makes sense. There's still that safety element, and that goes back again from an incident 15 years ago when there was a problem happening with that. And that's one of the things the Auditor General has said, that potentially in New South Wales we're not checking enough to make sure curriculum is being followed, however you want to follow that curriculum, and there's not necessarily maintaining that kind of child safety element from the department, and they need to up their game within that. But basically, so long as kids are learning, are engaging in the humanities, in sport, in literacy, in numeracy, and you can see progress at whatever level those kids are, then you're good to go.
The Department of Education has recently taken over the regulation of homeschooling. Has that brought much change with it?
Yeah. They're just taking on board many of the good things that NESA did. It's an interesting, almost conflict of interest, because families are choosing to leave the Department of Education, and the very organisation they're leaving has to then approve them to leave. So there was a wee bit of concern coming from many families about that change, because NESA was doing quite a good job. But I've been speaking with the people at the Department of Education, and they seem to be quite on board with supporting families with homeschooling and are going to try to engage them more, which is when we see in other states like Queensland and Tasmania, when families who homeschool are communicated to and part of the process of the kind of the management of homeschooling by the authorities, it works better.
Can I ask Dr. David Roy, what happens in those later years of schooling, the school certificate years, the HSC years, when it comes to homeschooling?
That is an interesting one. Not a lot of kids do NAPLAN who homeschool. They can choose not to. But we're finding, again, that the completion of year 10 is fairly standard for when they are homeschooling with anyone else in school. If kids want to do the HSC, that's when they have to also enroll in something more formal, either into year 11, 12 at school, or what is more common, doing it through TAFE. Because, again, there's particular rules about the record of study, the ROSA, and about the HSC, that it must be supervised by qualified teachers. So there's still a disconnect between people doing the HSC and homeschooling. But that said, HSC is not the be-all and end-all. The majority of people who say go on to university, they actually aren't using their HSC and ATAR results to get in. More and more people are using other pathways as adults or in their 20s to start university, and the HSC becomes irrelevant at that point. So it's not a big deal.
Okay, how interesting. Dr. David Roy, of course, you've been part of this this research. People can read more about this on the Conversation website as well. But what do you think the future holds for homeschooling? Do you think we're likely to see registrations for homeschooling continue to rise? Will they stabilise? What do you think that might look like?
Well, there has been a significant kind of tracking of it increasing more than enrollments in schools for the past 10 years. A really large kind of jump happened about 3 years ago after COVID. But yeah, homeschooling, although the numbers aren't massive in comparison to the number of kids who go to school, the increase is kind of on average around about 10%. Increasing per year across Australia, and yet within schools, increases into public schools is about 2%. So more and more people are still choosing to homeschool as they see it as an alternative option, because there are more options for us to do in society. So yeah, I do think it's going to keep increasing as more access to the internet and more resources are available for people to use.
How interesting. Dr. David Roy, it's been great to have you on board this morning. Thanks so much. It's been really interesting to learn a bit about the role that homeschooling has played in recent years and what it will play in the future as well. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, Kirsty. Always a pleasure to speak to you and to listen to the great music that you play.
Anytime on the ABC Listen app, Dr. David Roy, you can tune in. Thanks. Let's talk again soon.
Bye.
Thank you. That is Dr. David Roy there, lecturer in education at the University of Newcastle. I'd love to hear from you this morning about homeschooling, whether you've been homeschooled previously, whether that was a decision, a preference that was made, whether it had something to do with where you lived and distance to the closest school. Maybe you chose to do some homeschooling during the COVID pandemic outside of the lockdown time. So let us know.